Hello, everybody, and welcome to Libromancy, a podcast about the magic of books. I'm Josh, and today we're going to be talking about Sin Eater, the second book in the Iconoclasts series by Mike Schell. So let's slay with the magic of books. Now, let's just talk about this. This is the second book in the series. I don't know if it suffers from second book syndrome. It definitely suffers from something. I don't think you can call it second book syndrome, though. I think I would have to call it copycat syndrome because it felt incredibly similar to the first book. Not the very first book. There's only one. So let's talk about just some non-spoilery things first. The name of the book, Sin Eater, is a bad name. There's literally one scene about Sin Eaters. And this name kind of made me want more, or perhaps they talk about being like what a Sin Eater is more and how it works. And they do a little bit, but it was not enough to justify a title. And you could take the Sin Eater out and the reason they needed them, and it's basically the exact same story. So I did not like that. Let's see, what else was there? Like I said, it is a very similar plot to the first one. I don't want to get into it quite yet because that will be part of our spoiler talk. But another thought I'm having is that Mike Schell, for some reason, still has very little trust in his audience that they're going to pick up on things or notice things. As I was reading, I would see the same thing once or twice, and then I would know that it's going to come ahead, or things were very clearly foreshadowed that maybe he could have had just a teeny bit less foreshadowing, or instead of less foreshadowing of who was going to have what's going to happen to who, maybe he could throw in some red herrings, just anything like, oh look, this person, we thought this person might be the next person to come with them on their quest. Oh no, it's actually this guy, but it's pretty much just laid out straight, and it's not bad. It doesn't produce a bad book. It just produces a weaker book, at least in this situation. So now this book does have has a couple of my little pet peeves. One of them was a real world word in a fake world. Now this word was Holocaust. Now obviously Holocaust is referring to like the type of event. You could have chosen any other word because Holocaust has such connotations to it. Didn't really fit with the story to me. Now, technically it probably works, but that's a technicality and not like yes, this really works on a great level and makes everything much better. One of the other little pet peeves I had was somebody is talking about some writing on the wall, and they're like, oh, this bears a resemblance to the Azkayan language, like, where I was captured and such. And then the next character is like, oh, so it's Azkayan. And the guy's like, no, it resembles Azkayan, as in they may have shared a language at like some point in the past. And I just hate that reduction where somebody's like, oh, this looks like this. And then the next person's like, oh, it is this for sure. 100%, no stop. It's all their fault or whatever. And the guy's like, that's not what I said. I didn't say that. I said it was like that. And that's just one thing that sometimes kind of drives me a little bit crazy, and I saw it and I was just like, no, didn't like, get it out of here. So I think that's really all I have for the non-spoiler section. Very similarly, it was very similar to the first book. Just the characters feel very real, but still somewhat one-dimensional. They have moments and then they don't. Everybody fulfills a very certain, very distinct role. There is nobody who's just there or thrown in extra. The atmosphere, I felt like this one I felt less in the world than I did the first one, and maybe that was because the first book was new, and this book is a little bit more familiar, and they didn't, teach me anything, or, I didn't feel more involved in the world. So, again, nothing was crazy, crazy illogical, or didn't make any sense while I was reading it. So let's go into the spoiler section. Let's kind of get into it. And let me just first say that I predicted a lot before this book. don't remember my exact predictions from the last book, the first book that I had, but I'm pretty sure I was pretty close to the prediction that the new gods, Belu and all these other gods, were the gods of the Dajjal, or a subset of the gods of the Dajjal. And I was both right and wrong, where the gods of the Dajjal are the new gods, but they are not in fact gods. They are basically just super sorcerers who've bonded with like a heart of the world, we'll put that in quotations. It makes them immortal and that they can draw power from suffering. So obviously the book is not going to get into how they draw power from suffering, but that they can, right? Because it doesn't have that much time, and the gods are not our main characters, so why would we be seeing things from their point of view all of a sudden? Now, I did have one question about Timolus, because all right, well, let's get to this first. While I knew, or I had predicted that killing Timolus would be up on Aric's to-do list, I did not expect Timolus to be the first god they go after. I honestly thought they'd go more about the gods in the Dajjal ruins. They would go in, kind of unseal one, kill it, and then come back and be like, yeah, this one is dead. I got this one that was here. But going after Timolus was unique and surprising. I liked that. That was like, okay, yeah, they're going after Timolus. They're going to save the queen, or the queen will die because she's, a skeleton, basically. That's going to be great. Get rid of this big thorn in everybody's side. But then when I go get to the end and we're like, oh, Timolus, he basically put this all in motion in order for them to kill him. And I was like, wow, okay, that makes sense. Like, I see that he's bored of everything. He wants to die. He's done it all. But I was like, man, it wasn't like he didn't have any other way. He has to feed on so much suffering. And like, the sword's been around quite a lot of suffering. Like, you can't give it that little bit of juice there at the end. So now, Timolus, he says that he chose, because as they were divvying up on their return, like how they were going to basically pull the suffering out of people. And Timolus says, I choose folly. So anytime somebody makes a mistake or does something foolish and they suffer for it, I get that power. And I was like, doesn't that encompass everything? Because no one's perfect, so obviously there's going to be some folly. How does that work exactly? Like, if Belu, who is the god of healing, who takes the suffering from wounds and healing type, situations. So if somebody trips, which is folly, or like forgets something and hurts themselves, and then they have to go get healed for the suffering, like, who gets that suffering? Is it Belu? Is it Timolus? I just felt like folly, well, makes sense, and it works really well for the god of chaos and mischief and surprises. Just was like, folly is really pretty all-encompassing. Like, what don't you get what don't you gain power for? And if you're gaining so much power, like, couldn't you have just been like, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to disband my church. We'll distribute all the folly. I'll stop taking it. Then I'll weaken on my own. And then, the sword can kill me easier. No. Okay. Doesn't make sense. So, okay, again, we're at the end here of the book. We skipped straight to the end of the book, but I knew that Aric was going to kill himself basically as soon as they started talking, and they were like, we can't kill him. Okay, well, Aric, you're going to kill yourself to save Agnes. And as much as I like that, I didn't like that, because I liked Aric as a character, and I wanted to keep following Aric. I'm not as invested in Agnes. Oh, and this is something I should have brought up in style. We actually have multiple point of views. We have Aric and Agnes, and occasionally others, but they felt like they had the same voice. Like, if you didn't read carefully, they read as almost the same character. So you had to be, am I an Aric or am I an Agnes? You couldn't just kind of tell. So that was one thing. Now, I said it earlier, and I am going to talk about it now. So let's go through the shot-for-shot remake of this book. The book starts with Aric at home. There is an inciting incident. The first book, Agnes comes to his house to pick him up. Oh, wait, no, sorry. Agnes is sick. They send a letter. The second book, Agnes comes and picks him up to do some work on a special expedition for the Syriac League. They get to the city. They visit the League. They visit the Queen. She gives them the quest. Sets them off on it. They leave. They go on a journey. Wow. They go by boat for part of the journey. They stop in a city where somebody almost gets in a fight with somebody else, and they almost get kicked out. Wow, that again happened. They go to a temple. Great. The temple is the site to a god's actual power. They go there. Perfect. They meet the god and kill him. Done and done. They go home. Done. Now, this one skips a lot of the going home section, but it does happen. Agnes is back at home. So like you can see, it really is a almost shot-for-shot remake with different characters and a different destination, a journey, but they're very similar in plan. So it was weird reading it over again. I did not really love that. So now let's talk about our characters a little bit here, since we have them now. We have Agnes and Auric, of course. They are both swordsmen. She uses a rapier. He uses the Dejau sword. They pretty smart, pretty capable. Kind of get the bloodlust going. Then we have Sira. She's back, the cleric. She's good at healing. She's very positive. She played a very minor role in this book. She really did not stick out as much as she did in the first book. And I was a little bit disappointed in that because she was a good character. And then you have Chauka and Quilb and Kenna. And Kenna's a swordsman. Chauka is their thief. He is from a theater troupe, and he's kind of kicked out, and they take him with them. And then we have Queeb, the sorcerer, who is a broken sorcerer, so he has no stone restricting his abilities or power, and can do a lot of very cool things. Now, Quib is a little bit of an interesting character. He was captured by the Eskayans, put his soul in a jar and his body in a kind of like a preservation tank, and then they pulled him out and sent him off to war and, controlled him that way until he broke free. And he's a good character. I liked him. He had good points. I really liked that he's there in the middle of the temple, and they're talking to the Vidana. She's like, oh no, nobody goes past the throne. I will stop you. And so he turns them to stone, but he's like, yeah, I promised I wouldn't spill blood. Well, I didn't spill any blood. I turned them to stone. And it's like, yeah, that's the kind of stuff I love, where you followed the rules, but you still came out on top, and you played a trick, and it was well rewarded. I loved it. But then, sorry, I'm looking at my notes here, and I'm like, but he does go blind right before the final, chamber, basically, where Timolus is waiting for them. And of course, that's exactly the same thing that happened to Delogara in the last one. Well, she died, right? But they're about to go in the temple proper, and they're the night before, and then she dies. So no sorcerers, basically. It's like, well, why not have one of the sorcerers make it all the way through to the end? They could help you. I mean, it would be such a different story. It wouldn't be the same. I'm sorry. It just felt so much like the same. I did not like that. And then we have this running interaction between Chauka and Kenna, where Chauka is always pushing his buttons, and Kenna's always getting angry, and it's just silly. It was interesting. It was fine. I don't know. I did not particularly care for Chauka or Kenna. They were there. They were adept. Chauka gets stabbed once and, has to wait again. One thing I really did like was Ushul, who is the person and one of the gods who's betrayed but not made into a sword. He's basically a body snatcher. He comes in, takes your body. Well, he takes willing bodies or semi-willing bodies, and then does his magic and gets power from suffering. But he is weaker because he uses his own body for strength. I liked Ushul. He was pretty cool. I liked the manipulation of Gallo, the prison boy that he takes with him, that he tells him these stories, and he's like, I'm going to tell you a story about this, and then he can go and do the thing, and then at the very end, he's like, I'm going to tell you a story about sacrifice. And basically, that the Ushul is going to take over Gallo's body because the whole time he's been needing a new body. That would be something I wish had been a little bit more unknown. Like, ooh, did it? Did it not? Obviously he pretends to still be Gallo at the end of the story, but is it? We know for a fact that it's not because, we're smart and we can read the book and see between the lines. I just wish there'd been one or two fewer lines. Predicting that Alanda was going to become the successor, that was apparent from almost the beginning of the book. As soon as they announced, or she somewhat announced or told Auric that his quest was to kill Timolus, I knew that she would be picked as queen. There was a slight chance that maybe Auric would be king, but I was like, no, that's not him. He's either going back to Darbo or he's dying. And he died, and I felt bad about that. I didn't like that. Now, I did like one other random thing here before we close up. I liked that Agnes, when she saw Lenda's head, did decide to not share that information with Auric. I liked that she was not like, I'm just going to tell him because we both want to know. No, he doesn't need to know this. It doesn't help him. I like that. And I liked the character of Bacca and Timolus in this, because Timolus is Bacca. And I liked that character. He felt more real and more personable than a lot of other characters. He has these feelings and he's sharp-tongued, but he's, scared of certain things. Well, he pretends to be scared of certain things. I liked that character. But almost immediately I knew that Bocca was something else, that he was going to be quite special. I had thought maybe he was Pembar. Turns out Pembar's dead, because Timolus killed him right before they got there. I was like, again, why do we have to... Why didn't you kill him earlier? Why did you kill him now? He's not even close to you in power level, so much. But I think I'm going to have to wrap it up there, everybody. Thanks everybody for listening to me talk about Sin Eater, the second book in the Iconoclast series. It's a decent book if you want a shot-for-shot remake of the first book. If you have any questions or comments, please send them to libromancypod@gmail.com. Thanks to David Hillowitz for the intro and outro music. Please like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts from. And remember to slay with the magic of books.